Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Australians for Better Government update. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tripp. I'm the president of Australians for Better Government, and I'm joined, as always, by Mark Neugebauer, who is the vice-president. How are you going, Mark? How was your week?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah, busy as always. There's always something going on in our country. You know, we got South Australia elections and the outcome of that, and lots going on. We've obviously got fuel crisis, so there's never a shortage to talk about what's happening in our nation and wars overseas. So yeah, lots to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And we had a good conversation. I got a lot of good feedback about our conversation from last week. A lot of people felt engaged by what we were talking about. And one of the things we mentioned from last week was that you have been elected as Vice President of Australians for Better Government. So congratulations, mate. You definitely deserve it. But we wanted to go into a little bit of a background about you and get the audience and the members of Australians for Better Government to get a better feel of who you are and who Mark Neugebauer is. So, mate, I'm going to start off by asking you a question. You said recently that about 5 years ago you were politically agnostic, and now you're Vice President of Australians for Better Government, and you host a very good podcast called Faith, Culture and Politics, and you're a former political candidate. So what happened? What changed? How did you somehow end up in this world of politics?
Yeah, look, I think it's the same reason for a lot of Australians. In 2020, obviously, COVID hit the world. And so I guess my story is probably not too different to anybody else that got engaged in what was happening in our country, in our states, with everything that was put in place. So again, yeah, politically agnostic, just getting on with life, raising my family. Married for 27 years, 3 adult kids, some bonus kids as well, and just paying the mortgage, getting on, having the occasional holiday. But ultimately, when the government can put things in place that really stops the nation completely with all things that were still unfolding, and there was lots of mixed messaging going around, it really started raising some questions about the power that's been attributed to government. We obviously have a democratic society. We elect people and we put them in power. But over the years, and being politically agnostic, you don't realise what's happening behind the scenes a lot. A lot of people just, they get on with life. They're not too focused on a lot of this stuff because politics is boring for a lot of people, right? But when you start to realise that there is actually legislation put in place and bills put in place that can fundamentally restrict many of the freedoms that we have. But I think one of the biggest things for me and many others, and a lot's still going to come out of this in the years to come, is the mandates and enforcement of a medical procedure that a lot of people were questioning, rightly or wrongly, about being mandated out of employment for something that was still very much in trial phase, according to many people, and how it fundamentally affected people that had mortgages or whatever locked out of society. So there was, narratives and conversations around people almost being othered and not being able to contribute in society, as opposed to people that may have decided to take up the COVID injections at the time. And that really bothered me, whether it was an internal thing, I just really couldn't shake that away. And so that really worried me, and it hasn't been since, we talked about World War II, we had Nuremberg trials and that, and there was a big thing that came out of that in regards to mandating any kind of medical procedure on the population, or experimentation with medicine and that. So I think there's still a lot more conversations to be had here, and I think there's a lot still to come out of this, but that was fundamentally what made me. It worried me deeply that we had a system and in a democratic country like Australia, where you could just be forced or mandated out of a position based on a medical procedure.
You know, it's interesting since I've become political and you talk to people about why they get involved in politics. And a lot of the time it's because the government is really encroaching upon their lives. I see it in the renewables rollout. A lot of farmers are upset about the renewables rollout because now they have, these massive industrial scale solar and wind projects on their boundary or on three sides of their boundary. So they're pushing back, whereas a lot of people are agnostic and they might be upset about it, but they don't really get into action about it. They don't show or speak up or view or show their views about how they feel until it directly impacts them. And I saw that with COVID as well in a big, big way. A lot of people that are involved in politics now, specifically in the minor party scene, a lot of people that gravitated to parties like One Nation and the Family First Party and the People First Party with Jared Rennick and formerly the UAP, parties like that, majority of the people that are in those parties were directly affected by COVID and the government's response to COVID. It wasn't so much the virus itself, it was how the government dealt with it. And that's very much my story as well, Mark. I mean, we are in alignment. I was not politically agnostic. I was always politically engaged, but I wasn't active. And I became active because I felt threatened by my own government. And you should never, ever feel threatened by a government. And you can throw in the media and you can throw in big business as well, but the government should always be there as a safety net to protect people against things being forced upon them. And, suddenly you can't work because the government is telling you can't work. Suddenly you're being forced to take as you said, a medical procedure because you're going to lose your job. Like I did. I lost my job and I had to deal with the financial ramifications that came with that and the uncertainty that came with that. And a lot of people would ask me, why are you not getting the vaccine? And look, I had multiple reasons as to why I didn't want to take it, but I didn't feel like I had to justify it. I didn't feel like I had to write an essay as to why I didn't want to take it. But fundamentally, the main issue for me was that I looked at our country and the fabric of our country, and I felt this should not happen in Australia. We should the fundamental principles of what this country is meant to be about is about personal freedom. It's about people living the way that they want to live and choosing to make the decisions that they want to make. And this fundamentally goes against that by forcing people into lockdowns and forcing people to take the jab. That was the main catalyst for me to get involved politically. I saw it as a political problem and it needed a political response. And in a big way for me, I think Australians for Better Government needs to start having those discussions about personal freedoms and enshrining some of the personal freedoms into our constitution and protecting them, because not many other groups are talking about that. So we definitely need to talk about that sort of stuff. I mean, is anything that I said there, does that resonate with you and your journey through the COVID period and up until now?
100%. And look, we've spoken about this being on the board and the committee with Australians for Better Government, that we're sort of trying to avoid being involved in any sort of policy decisions or anything else like that. It's really about, restructuring things to provide better government. But you're ultimately right. And one of the things that really resonated with me, obviously, coming on board with Australians for Better Government and learning now is that and this isn't really the platform to really flesh what happened through COVID and the decision making behind it out. But I think it's really important to recognise that we have a political class, and we've talked about it before, whether they be staffers or politicians or bureaucrats, are caught in this system in a bubble. And I think if I use the South Australian election as an example, with the people that were elected, they're everyday people that have got lived experience in different trades, and that Corey Bernardi just had a recent press conference about this. They're not political staffers. They didn't come from a unionised workforce and accelerated from there. So I think what happened with COVID is there was a lot of questions that weren't being asked by people that were in their bubble, as opposed to people that have had lived experience that might have looked at this with a bit more of a critical mindset and gone and started pushing back as politicians or even bureaucrats. I think we have a political class and a bureaucratic class that's very entrenched in its own little bubble and getting advice and that from external factors that are potentially pretty compromised. And again, I don't want to go too far into digging into that, but I really feel that really changed it for me as well, was the decision making that was involved in everything that happened. And we know now when we talk to people like Gigi Foster and others, amazing economists and others, how lockdowns and everything around that was wrong. A lot of the medical procedures and things that were done as a response to COVID were fundamentally flawed and wrong. So I think there's a lot still to come out of this, but yes, definitely it massively changed my mind about how we're governed in this country and how we go forward. And I think, Stephen, the biggest thing for me, as I mentioned in the previous podcast, I'm 55. I'm getting on middle stages in life. I'm a father and I'm a grandfather. Now, I've had a pretty good life. Born in the 70s, it was a different time in Australia through that time, and I think you'll hear a lot of people say that. The fundamental reason I'm involved with what I'm doing in most aspects of my life now, and in being involved with Australians for Better Government, is I really want to provide a platform and conversations and mechanisms where I help to create a better future for my children and grandchildren. And unfortunately, mate, I think the current political class isn't working in the best interest of the future of our children. They're geared around continuously spending other people's money with reckless abandonment, right? So there's not a lot of cross checks and balances. They've got so used to saying, well, there's a pot of money, that let's just throw it here and throw it there. And you hear people like Gerard Rennick has massively different ideas about how to run the country, and other people as well. And I want to be able to look at those voices and look at other voices rather than the entrenched political class, and see if we can't make a difference. I'm happy to work with people like yourself, the rest of the committee in Australians for Better Government, and other people that want to see a better future for our kids and grandkids.
Look, you're right about the COVID period really exposing flaws in our structure, governmental structure, and a big way that relates to state governments. We found big flaws in state governments, like, for example, the constitutions of state governments. Each state has their own constitution, and unlike the federal constitution that needs to be changed via referendum, state constitutions can be changed via legislation, which gave the states an incredible amount of power. That's why you got these public health orders and things like that were pushed through just by legislation. They didn't need the approval of the Australian people or the citizens of that state. So there's big flaws that have been raised from the COVID period, and that has bled on from that. I mean, I know that you're going to use this platform to talk about the South Australian voice. We had the referendum, the federal referendum about the voice to Parliament, and that was voted down. But states have still pushed ahead with their own versions of that, including South Australia. So that's a big issue that you're going to be discussing. But when we go back to the initial stages of when you joined Australians for Better Government, it was through your podcast. You ended up interviewing Kevin Lockray, and then ultimately you interviewed myself, and we were speaking about ABG. And I noticed that you, on your own bat and on your own platforms, you started to promote some of the proposals being put out by ABG, and I definitely noticed that in a big way. And because of that, I reached out to you and invited you to join the committee. What attracted you to Australians for Better Government in the first place? Because doing a podcast with someone and interviewing someone is one thing, but then going on and promoting their stuff afterwards is another thing. It shows that you're really engaged with what they said and what they're proposing. So what was it that really grabbed you and gravitated you towards ABG?
Yeah, I think it was obviously one thing that we try to focus on really hard has been non-politically affiliated with any parties. Now, we all have our own ideas and views about which parties we may be drawn towards independently. But as an organisation, we obviously try and stay agnostic to any sort of allegiance with any party, and I think that goes a long way. And we've kind of obviously discussed about trying to not be influential on specific policies. So I kind of, that resonated with me as well. But and I really liked the idea of, because I haven't aligned myself with any political party myself. I do sway towards, obviously, a party that's more aligned with my Christian faith. So obviously I'm drawn towards a party that's obviously not doing real well in the state election or federally at the moment. So, Family First, that does hold a lot of the values I hold personally. That's just me personally, but not obviously part of ABG. But I like the idea of ABG being separate from that, more fundamentally looking at the structure of our governance and the structure of the possibility of being able to amend our constitution to really enshrine some fundamental rights and freedoms, and really look at trying to have some mechanisms where that can be enacted. As you mentioned, looking at the individual states and the federal constitution on how they can be strengthened and made better over time, to not allow government to, if they're elected like Labor here is in South Australia, with a massive majority, to just nilly-willy say we're going to put this in place and too bad. So it's been able to look at ways and systems that we can challenge the government, and looking at the way we vote, how we elect, who we elect into being, our representatives, our ministers, and the people that are responsible for portfolios. And we've talked about that before ad nauseum as well, is the type of people that we actually have running portfolios should have a lot of life experience based on those portfolios. So all those things that Australians for Better Government which it has been shaped to do, and as we're growing, we're going to evolve, and there's going to be more involved with that. It really attracted me to get involved, and you're right. It was easy for me to be able to promote the things we were doing. As I said, as I come on board, I had a good friend of mine, Campbell, that assisted with some promo videos, which we ended up using on the YouTube channel, and that was easy because it kind of made sense to him as well to be involved in that sort of thing. So, look, there's a lot of benefits. I think that we can make a big difference, but part of that is obviously education to the people and to help them understand what we're ultimately about, what we're trying to do, and get people involved. Because ultimately we cannot make any difference in this country unless we have other people see what we see and what we want to try and enact into the country for changes, and that involves people. It involves other people being involved. So, and that's kind of why I got involved.
It's easy to talk about the problems that we face. I mean, a lot of political parties base their own political campaigns on attacking the other side and why, they're doing the wrong thing. But it's harder to propose solutions and a vision of where you want to take the country. So when we talk about Australians for Better Government, obviously we have a lot of proposals. But what does that mean to you? What's your vision for the nation? What's important for you? What would you like to see Australia, I guess you talk about evolving, maybe Australia evolve into, or maybe go back to? A lot of people, look to the past and say Australia was a much better country and they don't like the trajectory that we're on currently. What does all that mean to you in relation to Australians for Better Government? Like, what are some of the proposals that ABG are proposing that you see as in your vision for Australia?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is the way that we elect our politicians and who we have representing us. I think one of the key things for me is being involved. Just my worldview and philosophy is that a minimal government to me is better government. I believe, from what I've seen and observed, so even being politically agnostic, but what I've observed in the last 6 years is that we've got to this point where it's costing a lot of money to run this country, and that's because we've got a massively bloated bureaucracy, and the numbers show this. There's graphs and statistics that show Australia's bureaucracy compared to other nations and the cost of running this country. And I fundamentally believe that ultimately people should be empowered to have and lead the best life they possibly can, with as little interference from the government as possible. So this comes back down to the family being ultimately responsible for themselves, their children being responsible for the decisions that they make for their children's lives. And I'm deeply concerned about government and bureaucracy getting so big that it encroaches into the freedoms and liberties of the family and the person. So that's one of the things that I'd love to work with, obviously, the committee with Australians for Better Government, but other Australians to say, well, how do we do this? How do we have a government that gives just enough? Well, there's certain things in this country I think we need to Yeah, it needs to be well funded. I think the defence of our country is very important. People can talk about how, the police force and security, and hospitals and all that is funded, whether it's just the states or the government. These are all the sort of conversations that I think need to happen going forward. But fundamentally, at the back of my mind is always the responsibility for people in their life should always relate to them. And I think the government's role is to as best as possible, empower Australians to be the best they can and not make it a burden on their life to fund government as it gets bigger. We've seen countries where government gets so big, they end up becoming too powerful, and people and citizens lose a lot of their rights. So I feel, and I'd like to believe that Australians for Better Government can talk into these topics a lot more, and I'd like to see, obviously people get involved to do that. Now, the other big thing is obviously our aim is to get people involved, and because we aren't dictators in this, right? This is the whole idea. We've got ideas and of what we think's right, but it really comes down to the people. The more people we have involved, the ideas come through. It should be on them. We can't put anything in place without the consensus of the people, right? So, but you're not going to know what you can put in place unless people start getting involved and knowing and working out what's fundamentally important to them. And so I've kind of just explained some of the things that are fundamentally important to me, and I'm just I guess we'd throw it out to people to see whether they feel the same way.
Yeah, if people want to check out our proposals, they can go to our website, australiansforbetter.com. And if you click Our Mission tab at the top, it will take you down to this page where it has all our proposals: reforming the Constitution, ensuring a true separation of powers, empowering voters, enshrining our freedoms, and direct democracy. And if we click on direct democracy here, it's all about engaging the Australian people to have more of a say in our government. And some of our proposals relate to public plebiscite. So if the government wants to increase the debt ceiling, then they would have to go to a public plebiscite. They can't just do it through passing legislation. Same thing with state of emergencies. We saw that during COVID, and I spoke about that before. If the state government or the federal government wants to put in place a state of emergency, they would need to go to a plebiscite to get the approval of the Australian people first. Same thing with immigration. If they want to increase the immigration levels, they would have to get the approval of the Australian people to do that. International treaties, sale of public assets. There's some of the things where we want more of a say from the Australian public in some of the decisions that politicians are making. We have recall elections there. If the government is not operating in the way that they promised to operate and putting forward the policies that they promised to put forward, then there should be a mechanism where enough people can enact a recall and bring down that government. We see that in California and other places. Citizens-initiated referenda. I want to touch on this with you, Mark, because I know you're going to dedicate another podcast to this issue. Is that an important issue for you? We probably should explain the citizens-initiated referendum. It allows the public, say, for example, a movement generates enough support to push a proposal, a piece of legislation or a policy, and then the government would then have to either debate that or maybe potentially enact that legislation based on that public support that's generated. And that is in operation in other countries around the world. So, this is an example of looking to other places, other countries where systems are working, and looking at how that can be brought to Australia and implemented here. So any of those things that you want to touch on, Mark, when we're talking about engaging voters more, and any of those that are important to you?
Yeah, look, I think the CIR, we've got obviously people reaching out to us because they'd like to sort of work with us. We obviously, not looking at affiliating with anybody in particular, but we're definitely happy to work with others that have got ideas about how to improve governance in our country. And CIR is that, and we're going to have some topic experts coming on to talk about it in detail, so they can explain to the public in some regular sort of podcasts or over a few to really go in deep into explaining how CIRs could work. And, again, it's a consensus thing. Some countries, they've got a consensus of 100,000 people that are concerned about something, that want to put a bill forward. They put it forward, and they have that. And some is a quarterly kind of thing as well. So there's quite a bit to unpack and for people to understand about these things. And I've only just briefly looked at it. There's a lot involved, and it's really about getting the conversation going to see whether people would be open to that. And if I can use an example, Stephen, if you look at here, exactly the thing is we're talking about the voice to South Australia. Now, 65% of South Australians voted no in the national referendum here in South Australia, yet the government decided with a majority that they'd ram through a voice to Parliament, which could eventually, we're talking about treaty and reparations and all those sorts of things coming out of that. Now, we've also just had an election on the same day as our normal state election, and from all accounts and purposes, it looks like there's only about a 10% turnout for that election, again, from the Aboriginal community. So there's not a massive amount of support behind it. But if you had a citizen-initiated referendum where people went, we're not happy with this legislation or what you've put in place here, there's 100,000 plus South Australians that actually want to put a petition forward to have it repealed, and then it gets put to the state again, to the people, outside of the election, a normal general election. And if enough people come back and say, actually, we don't want this, then they'd have to look at repealing it. So these are the sort of things that I look at. The other example, obviously, is the extension to the Emergency Management Act here in South Australia, which I believe is fundamentally flawed, considering what we went through with COVID. There'd be a lot of people that would be opposed to more power for the state and health bureaucrats in regards to emergency management. So you'd have the same thing. You'd say, well, we've got enough people here that can table this proposal to have it repealed, and go forward from there. And it would be the same as having a bill maybe put in place and forwarded as well. So, look, these are the sort of conversations we need to have about how do we give the people back. And this is where I think we've come too far. It seems like government and the bureaucracy has been given way too much power. They've also wielded more power than I think they should have over the recent years. And I truly believe that South Australians need to be given more power back to themselves to be able to overrule some things that aren't quite right. Now, we say Labor just got elected on, 37%, whatever it is. It's still not a massive majority, but the way our system works with preferences, obviously they got elected. But ultimately that gives them 4 years of power. And if they tend to go a little bit too far, what recourse has the South Australian voter, or even if you're looking federally, got over the next 4+ years to be able to change any legislation that's rammed through? And we're seeing more and more of this with majority governments. They're ramming through legislation quicker. So all these things, whether or not the people of Australia say, well, we want a ban on being able to rush bills through, we want them properly debated, we want to be able to have proper challenges, and all these things are designed to give power back to the people. And we talked about, obviously, independent senates and legislative councils. All these ideas are designed to give people power to gazump a majority government that might want to encroach because of their power fundamentally and further on people's rights and liberties.
Now, obviously, we'd like to take these conversations on the road and bring events to people around the country. We had 3 events last year, one in Sydney, one on the Gold Coast, and one in your neck of the woods in Adelaide, Mark. But this year, we're heading for a double header on the same weekend. The first Saturday of May, the 2nd of May, we are going to be on the Central Coast. You can find all this information on our website, australiansforbetter.com, and you can click the link there to get your tickets. So we're having Dr. Christopher Reynolds come all the way down from the Gold Coast to speak. He's an amazing a speaker, an engaging speaker, one of the best speakers that we've got in this country. He's an Australian historian and also a political philosopher, and he speaks very, very well on the Constitution and the way that our system of government was established in this country. So you do not want to miss Dr. Reynolds. I mean, we've had him speak at other events before, and he always brings something new to the conversation. He's not reciting old talking points that he's talked about in the past. You can go and watch his previous interviews that he has done at our Adelaide event and also our Gold Coast event, and they were two completely different speeches. So I'm sure it's going to be the same on the Central Coast. We've also got Katie McCallum coming down from Kilkevin in Queensland. She's a very passionate speaker, a great speaker. You're going to want to come along and hear what Katie has to say. We're also going to be hearing from Martin Stevenson, who is a local One Nation candidate. It's going to be interesting to hear his perspective about campaigning as a minor party or maybe even potentially now a major party. So it's going to be interesting to hear from Martin. Hopefully we'll have a couple more speakers announced in the next few weeks. But it's going to be on the 2nd of May at 2 p.m. So if you're in the Central Coast or around that area, please come along. We'd love to see you there. Jump on the website, get your tickets. And the very next day, on the Sunday, the 3rd of May, we're going to be up in Cessnock at the East Cessnock Bowling Club. Same thing again, Dr. Reynolds is going to be there, also Katie McCallum, but instead of Martin Stevenson, we're going to have Stuart Bonds, who is a very strong candidate who's been running in elections in the Hunter region and has come very close in the past, and with the surging support of One Nation, he might be your new member of the Hunter region. We don't know. We don't know where his fortunes are going to lay, but it's going to be very interesting to hear from Stuart Bonds and his experiences in being a candidate and being involved in the political system. He's a coal miner. He's in the coal industry. He's very much a working man. He's a farmer. So he's facing a lot of issues from government. So I'm sure he's going to have some ideas about reforming our system. And it's going to be very important discussion. So I do encourage everyone in those areas, whether you are in the Cessnock or Newcastle area, or whether you're on the Central Coast, or even if you're in the northern suburbs of Sydney and you want to take the drive up to the Central Coast, come along, check us out. And it's going to be a great day of great discussions. And as I said, we're going to be taking this on the road and hopefully having more events around the country so we can better engage with the Australian people about what we are proposing at Australians for Better Government. And the best thing about these events is the networking opportunities. I love going to these events and speaking to people and hearing their ideas. I get to meet some great thinkers. A lot of people have been in this space previously. They've tried to do similar things that Australians for Better Government have done or that are trying to do. And I like hearing their experiences and their ideas, and we pick up little things as we go along. We pick up things from our speakers. I know the Adelaide event, we had Michael Arbin speak. I've picked up a lot of ideas from him that hopefully we can add to our proposals. And also Dr. Reynolds as well. We've met him on this journey. So come along. We'd love to see you there. Unfortunately, Mark, you're in Adelaide, so it's with the fuel prices at the moment, it's going to be too expensive to bring you out. I'd love to bring you over and have you at these events as well. But mate, can you? You were at the Adelaide event. Do you have any thoughts or encouragement that you want to let people know when it comes to coming to an ABG event? Do you encourage people to come along?
Look, I think that one of the biggest things that I took out of it was the networking is actually being able to chat with people afterwards. Yeah. Obviously, you've got your speakers that are going to be speaking into a few things, but when you actually start to talk to people that are on the ground and doing different things and involved in different things, I think that's a great opportunity just to be able to share the room with like-minded people, maybe sometimes not even like-minded. You can contest some ideas as well, because we don't all have to agree all the time, because that's what, that's important to be able to hash these things out with respect. And come to sort of, some sort of agreement, because you're never ever going to agree on everything, right? So, but it's a great opportunity to network, to meet other people, and to talk about how we can definitely improve the future of this country. And because for a lot of people, everything motivates people differently. But for me, it's really just about our kids and grandkids, future generations. And I think we need to be forward looking for them and not just looking for the next 3 or 4 years, which is in political campaign mode. We need to definitely look for the future and betterment of this country, because if politicians, Labor and Liberal, who have basically jockeyed for position for decades in this country, we probably wouldn't be facing the stress we're under at the moment with fuel, the cost of living, and lots of other things, if we had governments that invested a lot more in Australia's sovereignty, Australia's capabilities and capacity, rather than listening to a globalisation and international groupthink. And that's one of the things I really want to push back on, and I'm happy to do it, is Australia, we need to be really thinking about ourselves, and it sounds very nationalistic and insular, but I think the globalisation method has failed us, and we have so much And I think we've got to stop listening to some of the groupthink organisations internationally, and really start to think about, what's in the best interest of our country. And unfortunately, Stephen, I think the major parties have got so used to dealing with the international outfits that they've kind of got too close and too much in bed with one another, and thinking more on the global scale than what's in Australia's best interest. And I'd like to be able to change that. Not totally. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We rely on trade. We rely on other nations, obviously, for lots of things as well. It's good to be a good international player, but I think we've gone too far the other way, and I think we do need to reel it back in a bit. And how we do that moving forward is having these conversations and having people on board to see what they think is what's best for our country moving forward.
Look, the politicians are surrounded by lobbyists in the parliament, whether they're big business or international organisations or whatever it might be. They're surrounded by the lobbyists. That's why we need more grassroots lobby groups like Australians for Better Government, and there are other ones popping up all the time, which we encourage you to look at and support as well. But please check us out. Consider becoming a member. You can go to our website, australiansforbetter.com. If you go to the website, you can hit the join button at the top. The more members that we have, the more powerful our movement will be. And when we start putting pressure on politicians to enact some of our proposals, the first question is going to be, how many members do you have? And the more members that we have, the better we are, the better we're going to be at prosecuting our case. So please jump on the website. We do encourage you to sign up and be a member. Please do so. And also, I want to point out, Australians for Better Government is a volunteer organisation. None of us are getting paid for this. We are doing this on our own back. And look, sometimes life gets in the way. Some of our committee members have been ill. Some of them have been facing very, extreme working conditions and been very busy. So if you can help out in any way, if you've had any experience in political parties before, if you've been on a national executive of a political party, or if you've been involved in another political organisation and you can help us out with newsletters and social media and membership engagement, hit the contact form there. Let us know what your experience is, and you can maybe be a part of Australians for Better Government and help us get our message out there. We're always looking for people to jump on board and help us. We can't do it all ourselves. So more engagement with you, the audience, and the people of Australia, the better. But for now, thank you very much, Mark. It's been great to learn more about you and learn your philosophies on the way that Australia should be governed. I think a lot of people will probably agree with you. So thanks for coming on, mate. I really appreciate it.
No, always looking forward to obviously doing these things more regularly as well, and hearing from people. That contact form there is also to ask questions and to maybe put some topics in that you'd like Stephen and I to discuss and unpack, based on how we can improve government. I think that might be a great idea if people are watching and they'd love to be able to throw out some ideas for you and I to bounce around. And there might be some opportunities for us to go live and maybe get some live chat stuff going and go from there and have some of those conversations into the future. As I said, we're busy. We do this voluntarily outside lots of other things, but we're really committed to trying to, make a difference in this country and through Australians for Better Government. So 100% recommend people to jump online, check out our website, check out what we stand for, what the mission is. If it resonates with you, then, highly recommend you get involved. So, no, good on you. Appreciate obviously coming on and being able to do this with you. It's great stuff. I think we've got a great brand. I think what we're trying to do is positive for this country. So I'm looking forward to what we can do into the future.
Yeah, definitely. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.